Hello there, world of tankers. Welcome to the channel. I'm your host, Droodles Bullets, and in today's video, I'm going to be showcasing tips and tricks that I use as a pro player. I don't know why I use that word, but yes, as a skilled player, I'm going to be showcasing some of the ways that I'm able to increase my average damage when I play games versus the average player. And hopefully by the time you're done watching today's video, you might have a different mindset and outlook on how you play Blitz. The first thing I can say is please do not be like this player on my team. We can see that I have an AMX50B. And what does every autoloader player on the NA server do? YOLO in to the entire enemy team. Do not be like this player. If you want to get better at the game, do not YOLO. It's very, very obvious when I say it, but at the end of the day, there are people that constantly YOLO, especially in autoloaders. Just because you're in a vehicle which can deal a lot of damage in a short amount of time and you see a tank in front of you does not mean that you should instantly push that vehicle. Stay in cover. Wait for the enemy to make a misplay, and then you can punish them. At the end of the day, the game has 7 minutes to the counter. And you don't need to use all 7 minutes in the first 30 seconds. That's really the best way I can describe it. Instead of YOLOing, you can play a little more passive and deal a very, very high damage game like this, instead of finishing worst on the team. This replay I'm going to showcase here is going to be an absolutely fantastic example of how playing smarter and not harder is the key to doing well. This game I platooned with my friend, Floof. And I'm not gonna lie, Floof is an incredibly aggressive player. And being aggressive, even if you're skilled at the game, is not always the way to go. You gotta read the lineup, you gotta know what's happening. Especially when you're in a fast tank. You do not want to be the first person getting spotted in front of a bunch of enemy vehicles. So we can see that I'm playing my light tank in a fairly average spot. I'm starting by seeing if anything gets spotted over on this hill because we do have a teammate which is making their way up. I can get some bleeds, and with my tracer shells mechanic, I can keep people lit up the entire game. And my toonmate is making a very aggressive play. We can see that our team is not here. Like, we have nobody here. Our Sheridan is AFK. Our E4 is camping on the ridge. There is nobody but me and the T100LT that is on this flank of the map. But we can see that even though 2 light tanks, or 2 mediums in general, have been detected, my toonmate is still proceeding to push even more aggressive. Now, 3 tanks have been spotted. At this point in time, I would have been gone. And you can see I'm in a pretty aggressive spot as well, but the difference is that I cannot get rushed. If this 1-2-1 tries driving after me, I'm going to back up off this hill and I'm gone. I'm going to drive down in the cover. I got an E4 covering me. I've got teammates covering me. I'm going to be fine. The problem is when you put yourself in this position here, you've basically locked your tank into this aggressive spot and you can't do anything about it. And we can already see that is exactly what's happening here. And it's not just the mediums. Now we are seeing the heavies get spotted. And just like that, while I'm over here keeping this Jagdpanzer E100 lit up, I look back and, uh-oh, my teammate is already dead, being rushed by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tanks. There's nothing you can do in that situation, except not put yourself in that spot. It doesn't matter how good you are at this game. If you put yourself in an over-aggressed position, the chances of you surviving are simply down to where the enemy team goes. Putting yourself in a very aggressive spot like that is something I see a lot of players do very often. And as I said, Floof is a skilled player, has a 68% win rate on their account for over 6,000 battles played. But at the end of the day, you can't put your tank in a super aggressive spot like that, because what ends up happening is you don't know where the entire enemy team's going to go. And boom, you get yourself stuck in a spot where now you can't back up, you can't get out of there, and you get rushed by an entire enemy team. That is not what you would want to consider a good play. And now it puts me in a very awkward position because I'm down a medium, a skilled medium, and I have to brawl this entire game by myself. Now again, you can see that I'm always putting myself in a spot. By the way, that bounce right there, believe it or not, lost us the game, and you'll see why later in this battle. But you can see that I'm never trying to over-aggress. I'm never trying to put myself in a spot where I am bleeding health for no reason. I mean, I do bleed a little bit of health from this 1-2-1, but throughout most of this game, you're going to see that I try to not be the center of attention. And that is the way you do well in Blitz. You want to be the player which is getting out damaged. Also, that shell from that Yo was wild. I actually don't know how the Yo hit that. But notice how I'm not poking when they're looking at me. In general, I'm trying to be smart about this. We can see the 1-2-1 has now decided that he's going to look at somebody else, so I get a nice shell into the 1-2-1. I can see the Yo is not looking at me right now, so I'm going to aim it on the Yo and get a 370 damage shell. I'm playing passive. I've put myself in a spot where the enemy team cannot do anything to me, and now I'm waiting for this WZ-1-2-1 to possibly make a misplay. Is it going to show me the side of his tank? I'm being careful, because obviously I don't want this 1-2-1 to shoot me, but I'm also seeing if I can get some bleeds out. So we have the 1-2-1, and what am I going to be able to do? Well, boom, easy shell right into the hatch. We're now up to 4,000 damage at this point. Again, not putting myself in an over-aggressed position. That 1-2-1 is at 1 hit point. I'm going to try and shoot him again, load in an HE. My RNG is not working too well, but thankfully this 1-2-1 is going to die because I'm going to get a second shell into his vehicle, clearing him. At this point, there's only 4 tanks left on the enemy team, and while it's not looking great, we can see that I'm now going to put myself in a position to farm out this M6 Yo. Now, I'm thinking to myself here, what do I want to do, right? Because I know I can pen this M6 Yo, but the M6 Yo can see me as well, and there's really nowhere I can put my tank that's safe. So I'm just going to back off this position, and I'm going to go a little bit safer of a spot. Now, I'm a one-shot for the Sheridan, I'm a one-shot for both of the Yags. I can't afford to bleed any more health because I'm a one-shot for 2/3 of the enemy, or should I say 75% of the enemy team. So our E4 gets to the side of the Yo, gets a very easy clearing. At this point, I'm going to try and make my way up the ridgeline and spot anything. Again, I'm going to light tank. I know that I can't play aggressive, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to play my light like it should be played and play a little more passive. So there's the enemy Jagdpanzer. I know that I can't do anything to the Jag, so I roll all the way off to the side, and now I start shooting this Jagdpanzer in the side. Because I have this tracer shell mechanic, I can get some very easy bleeds out. And what's funny is that not only does one Jag get spotted in this position, but there you go, the second Jag gets detected. I get a nice 274 damage shell, and I get spotted, but before I can back up, the Sheridan shoots me. As I said, that one bounce on the Sheridan caused us to lose this game because of the fact that player got to live and I wasn't able to clear that Jag. But you can see how throughout the majority of this game I played smart, I played passive, and I put myself in positions where I could help out my team. And at the end of the day, I still did 6,250 damage, putting myself in a very, very high amount this battle. I'm not going to blame the Sheridan. That player, even though not a super high win rate, did the right maneuver, put themselves in a spot where they could outplay me, and they did. So I'll give him credit, but you can see how one misplay from a skilled player causes you to lose a game. And this shows that even if you're good at the game, you're not impervious to making mistakes. The number one way to get better at this game is to look at what you did wrong and improve upon yourself in the next battle. Don't play super aggressive, and you're going to do more damage. The longer you are alive, believe it or not, the more damage you can deal. So if you are playing blitz battles and you're dying within the first 2 minutes every single game, you're probably making huge mistakes. And there's a very easy way to actually see your survival. So, for example, if I go over to my account and I copy my account name, well, actually, I can't copy my account name because this is a press account. Wargaming doesn't allow you to see press account statistics. But if I make my way over to a website called blitzstars.com, and this isn't my account, this is just some random account that somebody tried copying of mine. If we go to like Hall of Fame, for example, and we look at a skilled player, that pops up in like the highest games, if the website will load. So here we go. We go to like one of the highest games. Okay, how about this player here? It's a pretty solid player, has a 65% win rate 30-day. We can see the average damage. If you go down to the stats of this player from their 30-day statistics in tier 10, tier 10 is usually the tier you should be looking at, we can see how many games they've played, we can see their win rate, and we can see their damage per battle. Now, I can tell you that their win rate is a little bit lower than you'd ideally want for the damage per battle they're having. But if we take a look at their survival rate, it's because it's only 48%. I can tell you from my account, my survival rate is around 60%. And this is why I can instantly tell their win rate is a little lower than it should be. Sitting at 3,100 average damage, you should be easily going 68 to 70% win rate at the minimum. And that's why they're a little bit lower than what could be peak performance on the NA server. This is an NA player because I know this person. We can see NA player. And yeah, like, if this person ever ends up watching today's video, I can tell you the reason why you're not getting that optimal performance you could be is simply because your survival rate's a little bit lower. Now, I'm not sure what exactly is causing that. Your spot rate is very high. So most likely what I can assume is that you are playing a little too aggressive. You may be putting yourself in positions that you can't get out of. And because of that, your survival rate is a bit lower. You know, my survival rate, as I said, is sitting around 60%. That's a whole 12% higher. So that means out of 100 games played, I'm surviving 12 games more than this person would. And that's a big amount. I try to survive as many games as I can because that means the games that I'm winning, I'm also the reason why we are winning. So I can tell you that a huge reason to why you may be doing bad, look at your stats. Go to a website like blitzstars.com. Look at your survival rate. Look at your average damage. Look at your win rate. If you're sitting at over 3,000 average damage and your win rate is 60%, you're not doing something right. You're farming rather than going for wins. You need to be doing a sweet spot. If you're sitting at 3,000 average damage, you should also be sitting at minimum 67 to 68% win rate. If you're sitting at 2,500 average damage, you should be sitting at around 60% win rate. If you're sitting at 2,000 average damage, you should be sitting at around 55% win rate. These values should be very even. The more you go up in damage, the more you go up in win rate. You shouldn't be going up in damage, but your win rate staying the same, because then that means you're farming, but you're not actually helping your team. If your win rate's super high, but your average damage is pretty low, it's either you're playing lower tiers, but again, if we're focusing only on tier 10, the reason why that's probably the case is because you're focusing more on being a team player and less on getting out damaged. Now, there's actually nothing wrong with that. If your win rate's super high and your average damage is low, who cares? You're still winning games. But you could obviously be getting a mix of both, and then you'd be getting the best of both worlds. But that's really the best way to describe it. We can see another great example of just a very high damage game of me in the 116 F3 here. The 116 F3, I made a video on it a couple weeks ago saying it's literally the worst tier 10 in the game. And I still believe that very much. It is an incredibly mediocre tank. I don't think it's terrible. At the end of the day, I don't think there's any tier 10 that's downright terrible. But I do think that this is one of the worst tier 10s in the game. And the major reason why is because the vehicle just doesn't have anything remarkable going for it. It's alpha damage, yeah, it's a little higher. It's 490, but the minnow has 490 average damage, and the minnow has 10 degrees of gun depression. This tank has 6. The minnow has much more pen. The minnow, believe it or not, even has more accuracy. The minnow has way more armor. And when you add all these things together, it's just like, why would you drive this tank? The only thing this vehicle has is a decent chunk of hit points at 2,700 and reactive armor, which I guess is all right. But apart from that, I really can't say anything special. But you're going to notice this entire game here that I am never going to over-aggress. I'm going to put myself in positions where I can bleed out enemy tanks without bleeding myself. I can put myself in a position where I am doing everything possible in my favor. I'm not going to YOLO over the ridgeline. I'm not going to do anything crazy like that. And you're going to see that throughout this game, I'm able to farm more than any other player. Now, you could type in chat, oh, well, you had a free farm this game. Oh, you had a super easy battle. Well, if that's the case, why aren't you guys getting out 7,000 damage games? At the end of the day, people love to backseat drive. People love to make excuses for why somebody else may have a good game, right? I posted a video on the Rheinmetall Panzerwagen gameplay yesterday where somebody was able to deal 9,800 damage, and a lot of people are saying, oh, this player got super lucky, oh, they didn't deserve that game, they're not that skilled. And sure, maybe that player did, and I will agree, make some sus plays, which they probably could have gotten very unlucky, especially when it came to the 183. But at the same time, I don't see anybody in chat pulling out 9,000 damage games anytime soon. Most people watching today's video have, at max, 7,000 to 8,000 damage as their highest ever. So you really can't criticize somebody who has gotten 9,800 damage on their account when you haven't passed maybe an 8,000 damage threshold. What you need to do is stop focusing on others and their achievements and focus on you and your achievements. Why are we criticizing others that have achieved something great when you yourself haven't achieved that? To me, it's a great example of how ego gets in the way of performance. When people think that, oh, I could do that, but they haven't done it, then really what it means is that they couldn't do that. I have gotten many 9Ks myself. In fact, I still have a photo on my old iPad of a 10,000 damage game in the Tortoise and the FE2 and 5B 183. And I am obviously a skilled enough player where I can say, hey, I've been able to achieve these landmarks. I've gotten multiple 7,000 to 8,000 damage games in the past month. I had a 9K 2 months ago. And these are great examples of how you can get these achievements and you can deal damage. But at the end of the day, I'm never going to criticize somebody else for getting a super high damage game because I know the amount of work and effort that is required to rip out those games. We can see throughout this battle here, I have stayed passive, I have stayed calm, I have stayed collective, I've penned my shots, I've aimed properly, and I've already dealt over 4,800 damage. But my toonmate, who also had the exact same situation as me, who's also a very skilled player, is dead. Why? It's all down to how you play the game. It's all down to how you position yourself. And it's all down to what targets you choose to shoot. At the end of the day, what I'm doing here may look very simple, but when you ask 9 out of 10 players to do what I did in this game, they probably won't. And the reason why is because everything that I do, even if it may look simple, is a thought process. I'm thinking to myself, okay, so the 183s are over there. They just shot. Am I going to be able to put myself in a position next to this rock where I can bleed out the 5A, but also not get shot by the 183s? Then I'm thinking to myself, okay, so the 183s, I got to wait for them to get shot. I'm going to get a shell into the yo because I want to get that player cleared before I deal with these 183s. Because obviously if I start crossing, look, the yo's already looking at me. I don't want to be in a situation where that yo's looking at me and is able to now bleed me out while I'm trying to make my way over to the 183s. But we're up to 5,700 damage in this game. Now at this point, I don't care if the 183 shoots me. I have enough health to take a shot from him, and as we can see, that is the case. I get 1,014 damage on my vehicle, but it doesn't really matter. I'm up to 6,700 damage dealt in this game. So now all I'm going to do is I'm going to fire an AP shell right into the side of the U100, and just like that, I was not only able to survive throughout the entirety of this game, not only did I deal 7,000 damage, but I also did my job as a heavy, using almost all of my hit points, but surviving right to the end of the game. This is like the perfect situation for a heavy. In a heavy tank, you should not be finishing games full health. That's really as simple as it is. Yes, there are games where everybody finishes a game with full health. I've had them happen too. But most games you play, if you've done your job as a heavy or a super heavy, you should bleed at least 70 to 80% of your health, because you're doing your job. Now, that doesn't mean you should bleed all that health immediately. No. As we saw in this game, I conserved 90% of my health until I was at about 4,000 damage. But once I realized that my team needed me to move up, once I realized that I couldn't stay passive anymore and continue farming from cover, I moved up at the right time, put myself in a proper position to bleed out the 5A who got himself stuck in a position, and then I moved up to the yo, cleared the yo, and then dealt with the 183s. Everything is about timing. Everything is about how you play the game. And obviously sometimes RNG is going to screw you over and everything else is going to mess with you. But at the end of the day, when you look at a player that's able to go 74% win rate with 6,000 games played, and no, Noob MM is not on press accounts, then yeah, obviously you can get some really, really solid results out and some super high average damage, as we can see from, my 3,900 average damage in the AMX 50B. Like, these are some great examples here. So what is my advice to you? Don't play as aggressive. Conserve your health through the majority of the games until you're in late game situations. And something else which I didn't really touch upon too much in today's video, but positioning. Positioning is one of those huge things that if you don't position your tank in a proper spot that it's meant to do well in, you're probably not going to do all too well in it. For example, the Jagdpanzer E100. Where should you play the Jagdpanzer? Should you put it on a hill or should you put it in a town-based map? Obviously, the Yag should be played town. But where in the town? Where do you want to put it? I actually have a good example of this where I played the Jagdpanzer E100 earlier today with my toonmate. Now, both of us are in the Jag. We both go to different positions, and these two positions greatly affect how much damage we are both able to deal in the game. There's a reason why skilled players are able to consistently deal X amount of damage, and players that might not be as skilled are dealing Y amount of damage. And it's because of positioning as well. Positioning obviously has to do with everything. It has to do with over-aggressing. It has to do with this. It has to do with that. But the thing is, every single tank that you play, every tank that I play, has a different position and a different spot that it works well in. And you have to know where that spot is on every single map, depending on what the enemy lineup is, depending on what your lineup is, and how aggressive the enemy team is working, where your team plays, where the enemy team plays. This game, for example, I know that I have most of my team making their way wide over to this corner. And I thought to myself, well, if most of my team's going to go over here, then most of the enemy team is also probably going to focus on this alleyway. My teammates are already spotted there. We can take a look and we can see that my 752 is already shooting, which means he's spotted. And obviously, when you're playing a blitz battle, you're going to be looking at whatever is spotted first. If I'm in a heavy tank and I see a 752 spotted immediately, I'm probably going to be looking at that 752. But this is where you can be smart, because I know the enemy team's most likely going to be looking there. So if that's the case, I'm going to make my way over to a position where most of the enemy team probably won't be. Look at that. We got an IS-7 crossing, and just like that, I get a 774 damage shell into his vehicle. I wasn't spotted until I pressed the fire button as well. And there you go. Boom. Now I'm at 800 damage on my total, where my teammate in the AG is just getting around the corner. But because my route was quicker and because I was able to put myself in a spot where I knew the enemy would cross, I'm already at 800 damage. Now I know the 183 is a threat, but look at this. The Moishin tries crossing the exact same spot, and I get a nice shell right into the side. So I've already been able to deal 1,600 damage in this short game. And I'm trying to think to myself right now, okay, what's the play? The Moishin is backed in the cover to a point where I am not detected. My reload has been elapsed over 10 seconds. So right now, I'm not spotted. I was kind of hoping that because I wasn't spotted, the Moishin was going to try and poke, not see me when he was poking, and then continue to make his way out. But that's really not a problem for me, because at this point, I am just going to continue moving up. I see the IS-7. I know there's another heavy as well. The 113, is it? I don't know. The Regressor, that's what it is. The Regressor and the IS-7 are over on the side. But I'm going to get the Moishin cleared first, because that's the only player that can shoot me, right? So now at this point, we got two heavies oblivious to me. So I'm going to simply reload, get to the side of the IS-7, get a nice shell in. The Regressor is going to shoot me. I'm going to angle, but I'm already up to 3,000 damage. Like, this is a very, very high damage game. And it's because instead of putting myself in a position where I know that these heavies are going to be staring at me, where they're going to be in hull down spots and they're going to stop me from doing what I want, and I've got to go from all the way over here in the open, around and around, all the way up. Instead, I can flank to their sides, and I can just get super easy damage out. So the IS-7 is trying to shoot at my teammate. I don't actually know what this IS-7 is doing. Bro's AFK. But either way, I get a nice 3,800 damage out in this game, and then I get one more shell into the side of the AG. So, if we take a look at the end of the game here, you're going to see that I was able to deal 4,103 damage. And the reason why was because I positioned myself in a much better spot than my teammate for getting out those bleeds. My teammate is in a spot where all of those heavies are looking at him. The Moishin, the IS-7, and the Regressor are all positioned that way. So if you try to drive out, you got 3 tanks, which might take 1,300 health off you in one volley. Instead, if I position my tank around wide, I can get an early pot shot off, and then I can continue to push up. And if the enemy starts to look at me, I know immediately that my teammate is going to be able to push up with the rest of the team and box them in. Either way, the enemy team is boxed in. And again, it's such a good example of how you can play the game well, how you can put yourself in a situation to be smart and get out very, very good results. So let me know in the comments what you guys think. But hopefully at the end of the day, this video helped you out. Being smart and being skilled, yes, it's based off of mechanical skill, right? Having good mechanical skill is something that's always going to benefit you. And there's people out there which will, say, oh, you're not the most mechanically skilled player. And I've said this in the past. I'm probably an 8 out of 10 when it comes to snapshots and when it comes to crazy shots. There are people like His Royal Fatness, for example, which can hit some of the craziest shots ever. MJ, who can hit some ridiculous snapshots, which I'm just like, I don't know how the hell you hit that. Now, to be fair, I probably wouldn't have gone for it because I don't like to snapshot that much. But the thing is, I can account for maybe not having 10 out of 10 technical skill by focusing more on outpositioning and outplaying my opponents. I know how to equip my tank properly. I know each and every tank's reload. I know the best spots to put each tank. I know when to leave that spot. I know spotting mechanics. I know how the bushes work in this game. And because of that, I can use my brain power and intellect to do better than people in 99% of the games I play, rather than focusing on pure skill. And that is what I've always loved about World of Tanks Blitz, is that it's not only focused on skill. Yes, you need to have skill. You need to have good capabilities on hitting shots and aiming, and I got that. But more importantly in Blitz is the knowledge of the game, the tanks, and everything else. A great example is, there's a lot of times a vehicle will get released and nobody's going to buy it, right? The 116 F3. This is a vehicle that almost everybody in this viewing count does not have. But just because you don't have the tank doesn't mean you shouldn't get educated about it. Because at the end of the day, 1 out of 100 games you play, you might end up fighting this tank. And if you go up against this vehicle and you have no clue what it can do, now you're in a situation where you're either going to be playing very cautious because you don't know what this tank's capabilities are, or you're going to be focusing it when you shouldn't be because it's a pile of trash. And these are great examples. Learning about tanks, even if you don't have them, is a super important skill, and it's something which can help you out. So this is obviously a very short and condensed video. I mean, it's 22 minutes long, but really when it comes to skill, when it comes to capabilities and everything to know, this is very short. I could make hours upon hours of content on each and every guide and tutorial that everybody would need to know in the game, but at the end of the day, most of the player base doesn't want to get better. Most of the player base wants to focus on just buying overpowered tanks and spending money on crates, so I don't know what to say. Hopefully you enjoyed today's video. If you'd like to see more like it, please consider smashing that subscribe button down below, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.